I live in a thruple, and it all began with a single knock on a door. What was supposed to be a simple task, organizing a party for the building, turned into the wildest, most life-altering experience of my existence. Two men, two unforgettable encounters, one unforgettable night. And now, we are bound together in a way I never imagined. Clipboard in hand, I made my way through the building, determined to collect every resident's contact information for the upcoming party. The idea had been mine, a simple way to break the ice with my neighbors and bring a little life to the building. What I didn't expect was that one of those knocks would change my life forever. By the time I reached the third floor, everything seemed routine. A polite knock, a few smiles, and scribbled phone numbers. But when I stood in front of apartment 3B and the door opened, I froze. Standing there was the most stunning man I'd ever seen. He looked about 25, with golden blonde hair that framed his face like a halo, piercing blue eyes that seemed to look straight through me, and a body so perfectly athletic it made my own muscular frame feel ordinary. "Hi," I managed to say, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm organizing a party for the building residents, and..." He smiled, a slow, teasing grin that made my heart race. "You are the guy behind the party idea?" His voice was smooth, confident. "Come in. Let's talk over coffee." Something in his tone told me this wasn't just about coffee. My instinct screamed to be cautious, but his smile was too inviting to resist. I stepped inside, and the door closed behind me with a soft click. His apartment was minimalistic, yet elegant. The faint scent of cedar and something sweet lingered in the air. "I'm Caleb," he said, motioning for me to sit on the couch. "I just moved in last week." "I'm Marcus," I replied, still trying to play it cool. But as Caleb sat down beside me, close enough that our knees almost touched, the air between us grew electric. The conversation was brief. Questions about the party, a few polite laughs, but his hand on my thigh ended any pretense of small talk. I looked into his eyes, and before I could think, we were kissing. It was intense, passionate, and completely unexpected. Hours later, as I left Caleb's apartment, my heart was pounding for entirely new reasons. But there were more doors to knock on, more neighbors to meet. What I didn't know was that my next encounter would be just as life-altering as this one. Leaving Caleb's apartment, I felt like I was walking on air. My pulse was racing, my mind was spinning, and my lips still tingled from the intensity of our encounter. Yet, I still had a job to do. This party wasn't going to plan itself. Clipboard in hand, I made my way up the staircase to the top floor, shaking off the lingering heat of Caleb's touch. By the time I reached the 5th floor, I had convinced myself that nothing could top what had just happened. I knocked on the last door of the hallway, the apartment at the very end. The sound of footsteps approached, and when the door opened, I was greeted by another sight that took my breath away. He couldn't have been more than 23 years old. His chestnut hair was tousled in a way that looked effortlessly perfect, and his deep brown eyes held a hint of mischief. He was shirtless, revealing a sculpted chest and smooth, sun-kissed skin that seemed to glow under the soft light of the hallway. I swallowed hard, trying not to stare, but he noticed and smirked. "Hey," he said, his voice soft but inviting. "Can I help you?" I cleared my throat, forcing myself to focus. "I'm Marcus. I'm organizing a party for the building, and I'm going door to door to collect contact information." "Oh, cool," he said, leaning casually against the door frame. his muscles flexing ever so slightly. "I'm Ethan. My mom owns this place, but she's out of town, so I'm here by myself for now." His voice was warm and friendly, but there was something in the way he looked at me that felt almost dangerous. I handed him the clipboard, and as he scribbled down his number, I found myself watching him, his strong hands, his perfectly shaped lips, the way his shoulders moved with every small gesture. "You're really going all out for this party, huh?" Ethan said, handing the clipboard back to me. His eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, the world seemed to shrink until it was just the two of us standing there. "Well, someone has to bring this place to life," I replied with a nervous laugh, trying to ignore the magnetic pull I felt toward him. "You're good at that," he said, his voice dropping slightly. "Bringing things to life." Before I could respond, Ethan stepped back and opened the door wider. "You've been working hard. Why don't you come in for a drink?" I hesitated. I knew where this was going. How could I not? But the memory of Caleb's touch was still fresh in my mind, and the thought of stepping into Ethan's apartment felt like crossing a line I wasn't sure I was ready for. Yet, something about his confidence, his easy charm, made it impossible to say no. "Just one drink," I said, stepping inside. His apartment was cozy and filled with little touches that hinted at his personality. An old guitar propped against the wall, a stack of books on the coffee table, and a faint scent of citrus in the air. Ethan poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed one to me. "To new neighbors," he said, raising his glass. "To new neighbors," I echoed, clinking my glass against his. We sat on the couch, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. Ethan was funny, smart, and disarmingly honest. But as the minutes passed, the tension between us grew heavier. When he leaned in to refill my glass, his hand brushed against mine, and the spark was undeniable. "You're different," he said suddenly, his eyes searching mine. "Different? How?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Different in a way I like," he replied, his face inches from mine. I didn't need any more convincing. The next moment, we were locked in a kiss that was every bit as passionate as the one I had shared with Caleb. But somehow, it felt even more intense. Ethan's touch was both tender and commanding, and as we moved to the bedroom, I realized I had crossed a point of no return. Hours later, I left Ethan's apartment with my head spinning and my heart pounding. The clipboard felt heavier in my hand, as if it carried the weight of my secrets. I had come to this building to organize a simple party, but now I was entangled in a web of desire that I had no idea how to navigate. As I made my way back to my apartment, the reality of the situation began to sink in. Caleb and Ethan were both incredible in their own ways, and I was undeniably drawn to both of them. But with the party just around the corner, I couldn't help but wonder what would happen if they found out about each other. The day of the party arrived faster than I expected, and with it came a storm of nerves I couldn't shake. I stood in my apartment, pacing the living room, obsessively checking the arrangements I'd made. Everything looked perfect, the lights, the music, the refreshments. But no matter how much I focused on the details, my mind kept drifting back to Caleb and Ethan. What was I thinking? I had shared intimate moments with both of them, and now, in just a few hours, they would be standing in the same room. I didn't know if I was more nervous about them discovering the truth or about the undeniable attraction I felt for both of them pulling me in 2 directions at once. The first guests began arriving, and for a while, I managed to distract myself with small talk and introductions. The building's residents were diverse: young professionals, retirees, a few families. It was the kind of crowd that made it easy to blend in and avoid lingering questions. But as the room filled up, I couldn't ignore the growing tension in my chest. Caleb arrived first, looking effortlessly stunning in a black, button-up shirt that clung to his toned frame. His confident stride and easy smile made my pulse race. He found me near the refreshments table and leaned in close, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "You've been on my mind," he said, his piercing blue eyes locking onto mine. "Likewise," I managed to say, though my voice betrayed the mix of excitement and anxiety swirling inside me. He smirked, brushing his fingers lightly against my arm. "We should catch up later, privately." Before I could respond, the door opened again, and my heart sank. Ethan had arrived. He was wearing a fitted white t-shirt that accentuated his muscular build, paired with dark jeans that hugged his frame in all the right ways. His boyish grin lit up the room as he scanned the crowd, and when his eyes found me, they softened with a warmth that made my chest ache. "Marcus," he called, walking over with an ease that belied the chaos I felt inside. "Hey, Ethan," I said, forcing a smile. He hugged me, a casual, friendly gesture, but the way his hands lingered on my back sent a shiver down my spine. Caleb, standing just a few feet away, raised an eyebrow, his sharp gaze flicking between Ethan and me. "So, you're the star of the show tonight," Ethan said, his tone playful. "Just trying to keep everyone happy," I replied, feeling the weight of Caleb's stare. For the next hour, I moved between conversations, trying to keep both Caleb and Ethan occupied without giving either of them too much attention. But as the night went on, it became clear that they were noticing each other. Caleb's cool confidence clashed with Ethan's laid-back charm, and every time they crossed paths, I felt the temperature in the room rise. Finally, as the party began to wind down, Caleb cornered me near the balcony. "You're close with him," he said, nodding toward Ethan, who was laughing with a group of neighbors across the room. "We've talked," I said, trying to sound casual. Caleb's lips curved into a sly smile. "Interesting, because I don't think he looks at you like someone who's just a neighbor." Before I could respond, Ethan appeared at my side, his timing so perfect it felt deliberate. "Am I interrupting something?" he asked, his tone light but his eyes sharp. "Not at all," Caleb said smoothly. "Marcus and I were just catching up." The tension between them was palpable, and I felt like I was standing in the eye of a brewing storm. But before things could escalate, I made a split-second decision that surprised even me. "Why don't the three of us talk?" I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "Privately." Both Caleb and Ethan looked at me, their expressions unreadable. After a long pause, they nodded, and I led them out of the party and into my apartment. As the door closed behind us, the air grew heavy with anticipation. I turned to face them, my heart pounding in my chest. "There's something you both need to know," I began, my voice firm. This isn't what you think. It's more than that. And if you're willing, I think it could be something incredible." The room fell silent, the air thick with tension as Caleb and Ethan stood on either side of me, their expressions a mix of curiosity and caution. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to summon the courage to say what had been lingering in my mind since the party began. "Look," I began, my voice steady but soft. "This wasn't how I expected tonight to go. Honestly, this wasn't how I expected any of this to go. But the truth is, I hesitated, glancing between the two of them. I feel something for both of you. Ethan's brows furrowed, his lips parting as if to speak, but he stayed silent. Caleb, on the other hand, crossed his arms and gave me a measured look, his sharp blue eyes narrowing slightly. Both of us? Caleb said, his tone even but with a hint of amusement. I nodded, feeling the weight of the confession settle in the room. I know it's not conventional, and I know it's a lot to take in, but there's something undeniable here. Between us, between all of us. Ethan finally spoke, his voice calm but tinged with uncertainty. Are you saying what I think you're saying? Yes, I replied firmly. What if this isn't a choice between you two? What if it's about something more, something we could all share together? The words hung in the air, and for a moment, I thought I had made a mistake. Caleb tilted his head, studying me, while Ethan's lips pressed into a thin line as he processed what I had just said. You're serious, Caleb finally said, his voice low and intrigued. I am, I said, meeting his gaze. Then I turned to Ethan. I've felt something special with both of you, and I can't ignore it. I don't want to ignore it, but I don't want to lie or keep secrets either. Ethan glanced at Caleb, then back at me. And you think this could work? The three of us? I don't know, I admitted, my honesty raw and unguarded. But I think it's worth finding out. The silence that followed was excruciating. I could hear my own heartbeat loud and frantic in my ears. But then Caleb smirked, his arms dropping to his sides as he leaned back against the wall. Well, he said, his tone light and teasing, I have to admit, this is the most interesting party I've ever been to. Ethan laughed softly, a sound that broke some of the tension. Yeah, no kidding. So, what do you think? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Caleb pushed off the wall, stepping closer until he was standing right in front of me. I think, he said, his gaze flicking briefly to Ethan before returning to me, that I'm willing to see where this goes. If he is Ethan hesitated, his eyes searching mine. Then slowly, he nodded. Me too. Relief and excitement washed over me in equal measure, but there was still one question lingering in the air. So, Caleb said, his lips curling into a mischievous grin. Now that we've agreed, what happens next? I didn't answer with words. Instead, I closed the distance between us, pulling Caleb into a deep, searing kiss that left no room for doubt about how serious I was. When I pulled back, I turned to Ethan, who looked at me with a mix of surprise and anticipation. I kissed him too, pouring every ounce of passion I felt into the moment. When I stepped back, the three of us stood there, the energy between us electric and undeniable. I think we've just started something incredible, I said, my voice steady and filled with certainty. Caleb smirked. Ethan smiled. And as the tension gave way to something warmer, something more hopeful, I knew I was right. This was just the beginning. The silence between us gave way to cautious smiles. Caleb and Ethan exchanged glances, their body language shifting from tension to curiosity. I could tell neither of them fully understood what this arrangement would mean, but there was a spark, a willingness to explore uncharted territory. So, Caleb said, leaning against the couch with his signature smirk, do we just dive in? Ethan laughed nervously, running a hand through his tousled hair. Yeah, because that's not intimidating at all. I stepped between them, my voice calm but firm. No one's rushing into anything. Tonight is just about honesty. If this works, it works because we're open with each other. No games, no jealousy, just us. Caleb raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. You make it sound so simple. It's not, I admitted, but I think it's worth trying. Ethan's gaze softened, and he nodded. I'm in. I mean, I've never done anything like this before, but I trust you, Marcus. And I'm curious enough to see where this goes, Caleb added, his smirk softening into a genuine smile. We spent the rest of the night talking, not just about us, but about everything. Caleb shared stories about his move to the city and his love for photography, while Ethan talked about his passion for music and his plans to study abroad. For the first time, I saw them as more than just two breathtaking men. They were real, vulnerable, and endlessly fascinating. By the time they left my apartment, the dynamic between us had shifted. It wasn't just tension or attraction anymore. It was the start of something deeper. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter, yet unsure of what the day would bring. The events of the previous night replayed in my mind. Caleb's smirk, Ethan's shy smile, the way we'd all talked until the early hours. For the first time, it felt like this crazy idea of a throuple might actually work. As I sipped my coffee, my phone buzzed. A message from Caleb popped up. Still thinking about last night. Brunch? Before I could respond, another text came through. This time from Ethan. Hey, are you free today? I was thinking we could hang out. I stared at my phone, torn between the two invitations. A part of me felt guilty, as though I was already failing to balance this new dynamic. But then I reminded myself, honesty was key. I replied to both, suggesting we all meet together. To my surprise, they both agreed. We met at a small cafe near the building. Caleb arrived first, looking effortlessly put together in a fitted blazer. Ethan showed up moments later, his casual t-shirt and jeans contrasting Caleb's style, but somehow complementing it perfectly. The conversation started slow with the usual pleasantries. But as the minutes passed, the tension from the night before seemed to dissipate. Caleb's sharp wit balanced Ethan's easygoing humor, and for the first time, I saw a glimpse of how the three of us could fit together. At one point, Caleb leaned back in his chair, eyeing Ethan with a playful smirk. So, how does it feel knowing we're sharing Marcus? Ethan blushed, but chuckled. We'll see how good he is at keeping us both happy. I groaned, shaking my head at their teasing, but deep down, I was relieved. They were trying. The brunch was a surprising success. Caleb and Ethan, despite their differences, seemed to enjoy each other's company. I watched as they traded stories, laughed at each other's jokes, and even found common ground in their shared love for outdoor adventures. It was surreal, seeing these two men I cared for connecting in a way I hadn't expected. As we walked back to the building together, Caleb suddenly suggested, why don't we spend the evening at my place? I'll cook. Ethan glanced at me, his brows raised in curiosity. You can cook? Don't look so surprised, Caleb quipped. I'm full of hidden talents. I hesitated, unsure of how they would handle more time together. But the hopeful glint in Ethan's eyes and Caleb's confident smirk made it impossible to say no. Later that evening, the three of us gathered in Caleb's apartment. True to his word, Caleb prepared a meal that rivaled any high-end restaurant. As we sat around the table, sipping wine and sharing stories, I felt a sense of ease I hadn't experienced before. By the time dinner was over, we moved to the couch, the atmosphere shifting to something more intimate. Caleb leaned closer to me, his fingers brushing against my arm, while Ethan sat on my other side, his warmth comforting and familiar. It wasn't long before Caleb leaned in, his lips capturing mine in a kiss that left no room for hesitation. When we pulled apart, I turned to Ethan, whose eyes were filled with a mix of desire and curiosity. Without a word, he leaned in, and I met him halfway. As the night unfolded, the boundaries between us blurred, and for the first time, it felt like we weren't just three individuals navigating a complicated situation. We were something more, something whole. The morning light streamed through Caleb's curtains, illuminating the tangle of limbs sprawled across his bed. I blinked awake, the events of the night before, flooding back with a rush of warmth and satisfaction. Caleb stirred beside me, his arm draped lazily over my chest. On my other side, Ethan slept soundly, his face peaceful in the soft light. I couldn't help but smile, the reality of our connection sinking in. As we slowly woke, the conversation turned to the future. Caleb, ever the pragmatist, asked, "So, what now? Are we doing this?" Ethan, still groggy but smiling, nodded. "I think we already are." I looked between them, my heart full. We'll take it one day at a time, together. It wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, questions, and moments of doubt. But as I sat there with the two men who had become so important to me, I knew we had something worth fighting for. This was just the beginning of our story, and I couldn't wait to see where it would take us. Hey you, did you enjoy this story? I'd love to hear what you think. Drop a comment below and give it a rating from 1 to 10 to let us know how we did. And guess what? Do you have an exciting, intriguing, or heartfelt story to share? It could be turned into an amazing video here on our channel. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a thing. See you in the comments.